Most people don't fail to learn a language because they're lazy. You fail because you're trying to be perfect. You overthink every sentence, you obsess over grammar, and you wait until you're ready to speak. But that moment never comes and fluency never happens. This happens to a lot of people, and it will happen to you as well, unless you do what I say in this video. My name is Mikel Tejeria Mujica, and I'm a hyper polyglot. I speak a dozen languages. I developed a fast and efficient language learning system at the Innovation Center of the University of Deusto, here in San Sebastian. I've helped thousands of people learn languages fast. One thing I've noticed a lot with a lot of people, including myself back in the day, is that perfectionism kills your language learning. There are many types of perfectionism, and all of them are pretty bad. Unless you're at a C2 level already and you want to sound like a native speaker or something like that, perfectionism is really going to slow down your progress. Perfectionism is the equivalent of reading and watching YouTube videos about something you want to do, how to do it, tutorials, people who've done it, and you keep watching those videos over and over again for years, and you never actually start doing the thing. This happens to a lot of people as well, not only in language learning. But in language learning, the problem with perfectionism is that you never start speaking. There are people who think you should have a silent period in the language in which you spend thousands of hours watching content and listening to content in the language before you say a word in the language. That's one of the stupidest concepts I've ever heard. You get good at speaking by speaking. And if you don't start speaking, you will never speak well. It's much better to be able to communicate with a lot of mistakes than not being able to speak at all because you think you need 6 more months of silent period to start speaking. If you meet native speakers tomorrow, you want to be able to communicate with them. So what you should do is, yes, definitely try to improve your pronunciation, try to improve your precision, try to make fewer mistakes when you speak, but make sure you're able to speak first. Get rid of the fear of speaking. Speak as much as you can on your own, so that when you actually are with native speakers, you're able to speak, and even if you make mistakes, it's fine, nobody cares. You'll never become fluent by avoiding conversations until you can say everything perfectly, because no one says everything perfectly, not even in your own language. I make lots of mistakes in English, I make lots of mistakes in Basque and Spanish as well, in my native languages. Even if you're a native speaker, you make mistakes in English. I'm not saying it doesn't matter and that you shouldn't care about making mistakes, but don't stop speaking because you're afraid of making mistakes. And by the way, the more mistakes you make, as long as you're paying attention and you're aware of the mistakes and you're looking for feedback, the faster you improve. Making a lot of mistakes and then getting feedback is the fastest way to learn, according to neuroscientists. So yeah, try to speak as much as possible and always look for feedback. There's a lot of nonsense out there. There's a lot of really bad advice. Like those nerds who are going to tell you that you should learn perfect pitch accent before you have a conversation in Japanese. Nobody cares about that, especially Japanese people. If you're able to say what you want to say and they understand you more or less, they'll be impressed enough already. You don't need to spend 3,000 hours learning the pitch accent. And there's another very important but less known area where perfectionism is a huge problem as well. I'm talking about using translators online. Google Translate is not perfect, ChatGPT is not perfect, DeepL is not perfect, but they are more than enough to learn a language. I get comments all the time by people who are saying that you shouldn't use them because they make mistakes sometimes, and how can I be sure that everything's perfect? Why do you want to make sure that everything's perfect in the translation? If you learn 1,000 sentences and some of them sound weird to a native speaker, you'll realize they sound weird to a native speaker the moment you use them for the first time, and then you learn by sounding weird and learning the right way of saying it, and that's it. It's better to know 1,000 sentences and be able to use them in conversation, and some of them sounding weird, than only knowing a few sentences that you learned perfectly. And then the moment the conversation goes somewhere else, you're not able to talk about anything. So basically, try to learn as many sentences as possible and try to speak as much as possible. And yes, pay attention to the mistakes, pay attention to pronunciation, pay attention to the feedback you receive, but make the mistakes and learn from them. Do not be afraid of making mistakes, and especially do not delay speaking because you're afraid of making mistakes. Go for it. You know what you need to do. Write down everything you want to be able to say, every single situation, conversation, every interaction you think you will have, every conversation topic you normally talk about. Write down every single sentence that you want to be able to use in those situations, conversations, and interactions and about those topics. Translate everything into the target language. Generate audio files and read and listen and repeat those sentences over and over and over again. And then translate your sentences into the target language verbally without looking, and then check. That's how you correct most of the mistakes you're making when you're speaking. And if some of the translations that ChatGPT or DeepL or Google Translate gave you weren't 100% accurate, it doesn't matter that much, because at least now you can speak a lot. You can worry about sounding like a native speaker once you're able to have a fluent conversation in the language.